"You're a disappointment," my stepmom said, throwing my belongings out. "Your real mother abandoned you for a reason." Dad nodded. "Get out and don't come back." I left with one suitcase. 2 years later, they called desperate. "We need help, please." I agreed to meet. Their relief turned to panic when they saw who walked in with me. The day my world shattered started like any other Tuesday. I was 23, living in my childhood bedroom, trying to save money while working 2 jobs to get back on my feet after college. What I didn't know was that my stepmom Linda had been planning this moment for months, waiting for the perfect opportunity to finally get rid of me. Hey everyone, I'm Maya, and before I dive into this story, I want you to drop your location in the comments below. I know there are people watching from all over the world who have dealt with toxic family situations, and I want to connect with you. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, smash that like button and subscribe. Trust me, this journey gets wild, and you're going to want to see where it goes. To understand what happened that Tuesday, you need to know about my family dynamics. My biological mother left when I was 7. One day she was there making pancakes. The next day she was gone with a note saying she needed to find herself. Dad remarried Linda 2 years later, and she came with her own son, Marcus, who was my age. From the beginning, it was clear I was the outsider. Linda treated Marcus like her precious prince while I became the live-in help. Marcus got new clothes, I got hand-me-downs. Marcus got a car at 16, I worked at McDonald's to buy a rusty Honda. When Marcus failed chemistry, Dad hired a tutor. When I struggled with calculus, Linda said, "Well, not everyone is college material." The favoritism was suffocating. Family photos were carefully arranged with Marcus in the center, me pushed to the edges or cropped out entirely. During family dinners, they'd discuss Marcus's future, his dreams, his plans, while I might as well have been invisible. When relatives visited, Linda would introduce Marcus as our son and me as David's daughter from his first marriage, like I was some uncomfortable footnote. Dad just went along with it all. I think he felt guilty about Mom leaving and somehow believed that accommodating Linda would create the perfect family. He never stood up for me, never questioned why I was always the one doing chores while Marcus played video games, never noticed when I stopped trying to join their conversations. The breaking point came on what should have been a celebration. I'd just gotten accepted to a prestigious marketing program with a full scholarship, something I'd worked toward for years. I was so excited to share the news, thinking maybe this would finally make them proud. I walked into the kitchen where Dad and Linda were having coffee. "Dad, I got in, the scholarship program, I got accepted with full funding." Linda barely looked up from her phone. "That's nice, dear." Dad mumbled something about being happy for me, but then immediately switched topics to Marcus's new girlfriend. That night at dinner, they spent 30 minutes discussing Marcus's average performance in community college, but my scholarship, something that would change my entire future, wasn't mentioned once. That's when Linda escalated things. She started making comments about me being a burden, how I was taking advantage by living at home, how it was time for me to grow up and stop depending on others. The irony was rich, considering Marcus lived at home too, didn't work, and had his car insurance, phone, and everything else paid for by Dad. The final explosion happened on that Tuesday evening. I came home from my evening shift at the restaurant, exhausted and covered in kitchen grease. Linda was waiting in the living room with Dad, and I could tell from their postures that this was planned. "We need to talk," Linda said, her voice cold and sharp. I sat down, thinking maybe they wanted to discuss household rules or chores. Instead, Linda launched into a vicious attack. "You're 23 years old, and you're still living here like a teenager," she began. "David, she's holding this family back. We can't move forward with her constantly needing things." "I work 2 jobs," I protested. "I pay for my own." "You pay nothing," Linda snapped. "Room and board, utilities, food, you're a financial drain. And frankly, you're an emotional drain too. Always moping around, always with that attitude." Dad sat there silently, and my heart started pounding as I realized he wasn't going to defend me. "Your attitude problem comes from your mother," Linda continued, her voice getting nastier. "She abandoned you because she knew what you were. Selfish, ungrateful, difficult. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Those words hit like physical blows. My mother, a wound that had never healed, was being weaponized against me. "Linda, that's enough," I said quietly. "No, it's not enough. I've been patient for years, trying to make this work, but you don't want to be part of this family. You want to take and take without giving anything back." I looked at Dad desperately. "Dad, you know that's not true. I help with everything. I've never asked for money. I'm working toward my degree." "Sarah," Dad said finally, and his voice was tired. "Maybe it's time you found your own place." The betrayal was complete. My own father, choosing his wife's comfort over his daughter's well-being. But Linda wasn't done. She stood up and started walking toward the stairs. "I'll help you pack, tonight." Tonight, I was stunned. "Tonight, I want you out. We've carried you long enough." What happened next was like a fever dream. Linda went to my room and started throwing my belongings into garbage bags. Not suitcases, garbage bags, like I was trash being taken to the curb. She was rough with everything, not caring if she damaged my books or tangled my jewelry. "Careful," I said, trying to save a framed photo of me and Dad from when I was little. "You're a disappointment," Linda snarled, snatching the frame from my hands. "Your real mother abandoned you for a reason. She saw what you were going to become and ran." Dad appeared in the doorway. I looked at him with tears streaming down my face, silently begging him to intervene, to remember that I was his daughter, to show even a shred of the love I'd been desperately seeking my entire life. Instead, he nodded toward Linda and said, "Get out and don't come back. You're not welcome here anymore." Those words shattered something inside me that I didn't think could break any further. I took my 3 garbage bags and 1 small suitcase, everything I owned in the world, and walked out into the night with nowhere to go. I spent that first night in my car in a 24-hour diner parking lot, crying until I had no tears left. The next few weeks were a blur of cheap motels, sleeping on friends' couches, and working every shift I could get to save money for a deposit on a tiny studio apartment. But here's what they didn't know: I wasn't completely alone. During my senior year of high school, I'd been part of a mentorship program where successful professionals guided students. My mentor was Alina Rodriguez, a powerhouse executive at a major marketing firm. Even after the program ended, Alina and I had stayed in touch. When I called Alina, sobbing and homeless, she didn't hesitate. "Come stay with us," she said immediately. Alina and her wife Maria had a guest room, and they welcomed me like family. Alina listened to my whole story without judgment. Then she said something that changed everything. "Sarah, you've been surviving in survival mode for so long, you don't even know who you are when you're thriving. Let's change that." Alina didn't just give me a place to stay, she gave me a roadmap. She helped me see that my experiences, as painful as they were, had given me skills: resilience, independence, the ability to work hard without recognition. These weren't weaknesses, they were superpowers in the right environment. Alina connected me with internships, helped me build a professional network, and most importantly, showed me what unconditional support looked like. For the first time in my life, I had someone who believed in me without reservation. Maria, who was a therapist, helped me process the trauma. "Your father and stepmother's treatment of you says nothing about your worth and everything about their character," she told me during one of our kitchen conversations. "You are not responsible for their inability to love you properly." Under their guidance, I threw myself into my marketing program. I wasn't just good, I was exceptional. All those years of being overlooked had made me incredibly observant of human behavior, which translated into understanding consumer psychology. My professors started recommending me for advanced projects. Meanwhile, Alina introduced me to her professional circle. I started freelancing for small businesses, then bigger clients. My portfolio grew rapidly because I worked like someone who had everything to prove, because I did. The beauty of my new life was the contrast. Alina and Maria celebrated my wins, no matter how small. When I got my first big freelance contract, Alina literally popped champagne. When I presented my capstone project, Maria took time off work to attend. They weren't my biological family, but they were my chosen family, and the love felt more real than anything I'd experienced at home. 2 years passed. 2 years of growth, success, and healing. I'd graduated summa cum laude, built a thriving freelance business, and was in talks with a major agency about a senior position. I'd also met David, yes, ironically named David like my father, who was kind, supportive, and everything a partner should be. But my biological family's silence was deafening. No birthday calls, no Christmas cards, no acknowledgement that I existed. I'd sent Dad a graduation announcement, not because I expected anything, but because some part of me hoped he might be proud. Nothing. Then, on a rainy Thursday morning, my phone rang with Dad's number. "Sarah," his voice sounded strained. "Dad," I kept my voice neutral. "How are you doing? We haven't heard from you in so long." The audacity was breathtaking. They threw me out and then acted like I was the one who disappeared. "I'm fine, what do you need?" There was a long pause. We're going through a tough time. Linda lost her job 6 months ago and Marcus," he sighed heavily. "Marcus got into some legal trouble, DUI, and he hit someone's car. The lawsuits, the lawyer fees, Linda's medical bills were drowning." I said nothing. "The house, we might lose the house. The bank is starting foreclosure proceedings. Sarah, I know things ended badly between us, but you're my daughter. We need help, please." The man who told me to get out and never come back was asking for help. The woman who called me a disappointment and threw my belongings in garbage bags needed me now. "What kind of help?" I asked. "Financial, if you could just help with some of the payments or co-sign for a loan, or—" His voice was getting desperate. "I know you're doing well. Elena Rodriguez called looking for references for you last year. She said you were applying for senior positions." So they'd been keeping tabs on me. They knew I was successful, and now they wanted a piece of it. "I'll think about it," I said finally. "Sarah, please, we really need." I said I'll think about it. After I hung up, Elena found me staring out the window. "Everything okay?" I told her about the call. Elena's expression darkened. "What do you want to do?" "I want to help," I said, surprising myself. Not because they deserve it, but because I want to be the person who helps, even when it's not deserved. But I also want them to understand exactly who they threw away. Elena smiled slowly. "I think I can help with that." Here's where I need to tell you about the months that followed, because they weren't just about planning revenge, they were about building something extraordinary. Elena didn't just help me strategize, she transformed me into the professional powerhouse I never knew I could be. The marketing program I'd been accepted into was demanding, but with Elena's guidance, I didn't just excel, I revolutionized it. She introduced me to real clients, let me shadow high-level meetings, and most importantly, taught me how to command a room. "Maya," she'd say, "you've spent so long making yourself small to fit into spaces that weren't meant for you. It's time to learn how to take up the space you deserve." And boy, did I learn. My capstone project wasn't just theoretical, it was a complete rebranding campaign for a struggling nonprofit that Elena connected me with. The campaign was so successful it got picked up by national media. Suddenly, professors were using my work as examples, and industry professionals were reaching out. But Elena's mentorship went deeper than career development. She and Maria created what felt like my first real family dinner every Sunday. We'd cook together, talk about everything and nothing, and they'd share stories about their own journey as a couple in the corporate world. These weren't people trying to fix me or save me, they were people genuinely enjoying my company and wanting to see me succeed. "You know what's fascinating about you, Maya?" Maria said one evening as we cleaned dishes. "You have this incredible ability to read people and situations. It comes from years of having to survive in an unpredictable environment. In the right context, that's a superpower." She was right. All those years of walking on eggshells, trying to anticipate Linda's moods, learning to read Dad's silences, it had made me incredibly intuitive about human behavior. In marketing, this translated to understanding consumer psychology in ways that impressed even seasoned professionals. My freelance business exploded. What started as small local projects grew into contracts with major brands. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving in ways I'd never imagined possible. Every success felt like proof that Linda had been wrong about everything. The best part was watching myself transform physically and emotionally. I started standing straighter, speaking louder, taking up space. Elena taught me how to dress for success, but more importantly, how to carry myself like someone who belonged in every room I entered. The scared, diminished girl who'd been thrown out with garbage bags was becoming someone unrecognizable, someone powerful. Elena also introduced me to her network, and that's how I met David Chen at a charity fundraiser. He wasn't just attractive in his police lieutenant uniform. He was kind, funny, and when I told him about my family situation, his response was immediate empathy rather than trying to fix or minimize it. "Some people shouldn't be parents," he said simply. "I see the aftermath of family dysfunction every day in my job. The fact that you've built this life despite their treatment says everything about your character and nothing about theirs." David became another anchor in my chosen family. He'd grown up in a loving home and was genuinely baffled by stories of my childhood. "Your stepmother said what to you?" he'd ask, his cop instincts making him want to categorize behaviors. "Maya, that's emotional abuse. You know that, right?" Having someone with legal training validate my experiences was incredibly healing. David helped me understand that what I'd endured wasn't just difficult family dynamics, it was actual abuse with legal implications. As my 2-year anniversary of being kicked out approached, I'd built something remarkable. My income had grown from minimum wage to 6 figures. I had a beautiful apartment, a thriving career, and relationships that filled me with joy instead of anxiety. Most importantly, I'd learned to value myself. That's why when Dad's call came, I was ready. A week later, I called Dad back. "I'll help," I said. "Let's meet Sunday to discuss the details." The relief in his voice was palpable. "Thank you, Sarah. Thank you so much. Can you come to the house?" "No," I said firmly. "Neutral location. The Marriott downtown, the restaurant, 2 o'clock. Sunday arrived. I dressed carefully, a sharp business suit that Alina had helped me pick out, my hair styled professionally, carrying a leather portfolio. I looked successful because I was successful. I arrived first and got a table. When Dad and Linda walked in, I barely recognized them. Dad looked 10 years older, his hair completely gray, his clothes worn. Linda looked haggard, the smug confidence replaced with desperation. They sat down, and Linda immediately started talking. "Sarah, thank you so much for agreeing to help. We know things got heated when you left, but family is family, right?" "When I left," I repeated calmly. "Is that how you remember it?" Dad shifted uncomfortably. "What matters is we're here now." Linda nodded eagerly. "Exactly. We need about 50,000 to catch up on everything and get back on track. We know that's a lot, but you're doing so well now." But here's what they didn't know about how well I was really doing. While they'd been struggling with their financial crisis, I hadn't just been building a career, I'd been building an empire. The freelance work had evolved into something much bigger. Alina had been so impressed with my capabilities that 6 months earlier, she'd made me an offer I couldn't refuse. A full partnership in a new division of her company, specifically focused on crisis management and brand rehabilitation. My background in surviving toxic environments had given me unique insights into helping companies navigate scandals and rebuild their reputations. The partnership deal alone was worth more than Dad made in 5 years. But beyond that, I'd been making strategic investments, buying real estate, and building multiple income streams. The scared girl with 3 garbage bags had become a woman with a 7-figure net worth. I opened my portfolio and pulled out a folder. "Before we discuss money, I want to show you something." I handed them copies of my graduation photos, summa cum laude, awards, honors society recognition. "These are from my graduation 2 years ago. I sent Dad an announcement." Dad's face flushed. We were going through a lot then." "Too much to send a text, congratulating your daughter on graduating with highest honors." Linda waved dismissively. "Sarah, let's focus on now." "No, let's focus on then." I pulled out more papers. These are the therapy bills I paid to deal with the trauma of being thrown out of my childhood home. This is documentation of the nights I slept in my car. This is the police report from when someone tried to break into my car while I was sleeping in it. Their faces were getting paler. But here's what's interesting, I continued, pulling out business cards and letters. These are recommendations from my professors, testimonials from clients, job offers from major firms. Turns out, all those years of being told I was a disappointment, I was actually building resilience, work ethic, and emotional intelligence. I handed them another set of papers. These are my current contracts and income statements. You're right, I am doing well, very well. Linda's eyes lit up with greed, but Dad looked increasingly uncomfortable. The $50,000 you're asking for, that's what I made last month, freelancing. Their jaws dropped. But here's the thing, I continued, my voice steady and calm. The family that threw me out like garbage doesn't get to benefit from the success I built from nothing. Sarah, Dad started, you're my daughter. Am I interrupted. Because 2 years ago you told me to get out and never come back. You said I wasn't welcome. So which is it? Am I your daughter or am I not welcome? The restaurant had gone quiet around us. Linda was staring at me like she'd never seen me before. You want to know the real irony? I asked. I would have helped. Despite everything, if you had reached out with love, with an apology, with any acknowledgement of how you treated me, I would have helped. Because that's who I am. I reached into my portfolio one more time and pulled out a final document. But instead, you called only when you needed something, so here's what's going to happen. I slid the paper across the table. This is a contract. I will pay off your house, cover Marcus's legal fees, and give you enough to get back on your feet. Their relief was visible. In exchange, I continued, you will sign a legal agreement acknowledging the emotional abuse, apologizing formally, and agreeing to attend family therapy if you want any ongoing relationship with me. Linda's face twisted. Emotional abuse, we gave you a home. You gave Marcus a home. You gave me a place to exist until it was convenient to get rid of me. Dad was reading the contract, his face growing redder. This is pretty harsh, Sarah. Is it harsher than throwing your daughter out in the middle of the night with garbage bags? That's when the restaurant door opened and Alina walked in. She was dressed in a sharp power suit, her presence commanding immediate attention. Behind her was Maria, equally professional, and behind Maria was David, my boyfriend, in his lieutenant's uniform. Alina sat down at our table without being invited. I hope you don't mind me joining. I'm Alina Rodriguez, CEO of Rodriguez Marketing Group, Maya's mentor and chosen family. The color drained from Linda's face as she recognized the name, the same Alina who had called Dad for references. Alina continued smoothly, I wanted to meet the people who raised such an exceptional young woman. Although from what Maya's told me, raised might be too generous a term. Maria sat down next. I'm Maria Rodriguez, family therapist. I've been working with Maya to process the trauma from her childhood. Fascinating case study in resilience, really. Finally, David sat down, his police uniform impossible to ignore. David Chen, Maya's boyfriend, I've heard a lot about you. But here's what made this moment even more powerful. Alina hadn't come alone in the way they expected. As she settled into her chair, she placed a small recording device on the table. I hope you don't mind, Alina said casually, but Maya's story has become something of a case study in our crisis management training. We like to document these family intervention meetings for educational purposes. Don't worry, we'll only use it internally. The recording device was actually just for show, but Dad and Linda didn't know that. Suddenly, they realized every word they said was potentially being preserved forever. Alina opened her own portfolio. Maya showed me your family photos, she said, laying out printed screenshots. Interesting how she's cropped out or missing from most of them. That's not normal family behavior. Maria nodded. The systematic exclusion, the emotional neglect, the sudden abandonment, these are textbook abuse patterns. David leaned forward. The part where you threw her belongings in garbage bags and put her on the street, That's illegal in most jurisdictions. Constructive eviction, we call it. But David wasn't done establishing the legal implications. He pulled out his own notebook and started reading from it like he was giving testimony. Emotional abuse of a dependent adult, constructive eviction without proper notice, financial coercion, intentional infliction of emotional distress. He looked up at them. Maya documented everything. Dates, witnesses, the condition she was in when she left. We could file charges tomorrow if we wanted to. Linda's face went white. Charges were her family. Family doesn't make it legal, David said matter-of-factly. And honestly, some of the stuff Maya's told me would make even seasoned cops angry. Throwing a kid out in garbage bags, that's the kind of thing that makes headlines. Dad and Linda looked like cornered animals. Elena placed another document on the table. This is a counteroffer. Rodriguez Marketing Group will hire Marcus as an entry-level assistant, provided he completes addiction counseling and community service. We'll pay for Linda's job retraining. We'll help restructure your mortgage at better terms through our corporate relationships. Their eyes widened with hope. In exchange, Elena continued, you'll participate in family therapy, issue a public apology to Sarah, and sign agreements ensuring she has equal standing in any family decisions or inheritances going forward. And, Maria added, you'll attend parenting classes to understand the impact of favoritism and emotional neglect. Linda's face was cycling through emotions: shock, anger, desperation, calculation. This is blackmail, she finally sputtered. David shook his head. Actually, it's accountability. Sarah could sue you for emotional damages and probably win. Instead, she's offering you a path to redemption. I leaned forward. Here's what you don't understand. I don't need you anymore. I have a family, Elena, Maria, David, colleagues who respect me, friends who love me. You threw me away and I built something better. But, I continued, I'm willing to help you rebuild your lives if you're willing to acknowledge the damage you did and commit to being better. But here's the part that really drove the knife home. I pulled out my phone and showed them something that made their faces go completely ashen. This is my bank account balance, I said, turning the screen toward them. See those numbers, that $50,000 you're asking for? I make that in 2 weeks now. Linda's eyes widened, doing the math. But here's what's really interesting, I continued, swiping to another screen. This is the property management app for my real estate portfolio. I own 6 rental properties now, including, and this is my favorite part, I own the mortgage company that's foreclosing on your house. The silence was deafening. That's right, I said, savoring every word. When Elena found out about your situation, she helped me buy the debt from your lender. So technically, you're not asking a stranger for help. You're asking your landlord. Dad's mouth was moving, but no sound was coming out. The beautiful irony, I continued, is that I could solve your problem with a single phone call. I could forgive the debt, restructure the payments, whatever I wanted, because I own it now. The silence stretched for several minutes. Linda kept looking between the contract and Elena, clearly recognizing that this wasn't just about money, this was about power, and she had none. Dad finally spoke. The therapy, the apology, what if we don't want to do that? Elena smiled coolly. Then you don't get the help. Simple. And Sarah goes back to being successful without you, Maria added. The only difference is you'll have learned that your actions have consequences. I watched them struggle with the decision. Part of me hoped they'd choose pride over pragmatism. It would make cutting them off permanently much easier. But Linda, ever the survivor, swallowed her pride first. Fine, we'll do the therapy. Dad nodded reluctantly. If it means keeping the house. It means more than keeping the house, I said firmly. It means earning back the right to call yourselves my family. Elena placed contracts in front of each of them. These outline the specific terms, timelines, and expectations. Break any part of the agreement, and the support stops immediately. As they signed, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Not quite satisfaction, not quite sadness, more like closure. The little girl who had desperately wanted their love was finally getting acknowledgement, even if it came with legal coercion. But I wasn't done with my revelations. "There's one more thing," I said as they finished signing. They looked up nervously. "Marcus isn't invited to my wedding next spring. Not until he's completed his part of the agreement and demonstrated genuine change." Linda's face twisted. "Maya, he's your brother." "He's your son," I corrected. "He became my brother when he started treating me like one. Until then, he's just the person you chose over me for 20 years. Elena leaned forward with one final document. "And this," she said, "is the most important one." She placed what looked like a business contract on the table. "Maya hasn't just been successful," Elena explained. "She's been revolutionary. Her work in crisis management and brand rehabilitation has caught the attention of some major players. Maya, would you like to tell them?" I smiled, savoring this moment I'd been planning for months. "I've been offered a position as Chief Marketing Officer for Harrison Global," I said, watching their faces. "It's a Fortune 500 company. The salary alone is more than Dad has made in his entire career." Linda looked confused. "What does that have to do with us?" "Harrison Global just acquired Rodriguez Marketing Group," I continued. "Which means I'm now Elena's boss, and our first major client, the mortgage company that holds your debt." The pieces were falling into place in Dad's mind, and his face was cycling through every emotion possible. "So here's how this works now," I said, my voice completely calm. "You'll attend therapy not because I'm asking nicely, but because the CEO of the company that owns your mortgage is requiring it. You'll issue that public apology because it's a condition of your loan modification. And you'll treat me with respect because I'm no longer the powerless girl you threw away. I'm the woman who controls your financial future." The meeting ended with awkward handshakes and promises to start therapy the following week. As they left, I could hear Linda hissing at Dad about how difficult I'd become. Elena laughed. "You know what that is. That's the sound of someone who's lost control and doesn't like it." But the real satisfaction came in the weeks that followed. The therapy sessions were brutal but necessary, and I insisted on being present for several of them. Watching Linda struggle to take responsibility, seeing Dad finally confront his enabling behavior, it was painful but vindicating. The most shocking revelation came during the third session when Maria, the therapist, asked Linda directly, "Why do you think you targeted Maya so specifically?" Linda broke down completely. Through tears, she admitted something that stunned everyone in the room. She reminded me of David's first wife. Same eyes, same stubborn streak. I hated her for existing, for being proof that he had loved someone before me. Dad looked horrified. "Linda, you tortured my daughter because you were jealous of her dead mother." "She wasn't dead," Linda screamed. "She left. She chose to leave, and Maya was just like her, selfish and ungrateful." That's when Maria dropped the bombshell that changed everything. "Maya," she said gently, "I need to tell you something about your mother. Linda, you need to hear this too." Maria had been doing her own research, and what she'd found was devastating. My mother hadn't left because she was selfish or wanted to find herself. She'd left because Linda had been systematically poisoning Dad against her, telling him lies about infidelity, about drug use, about neglect. "Your mother left because she thought she was protecting you," Maria explained. "Linda convinced your father that your mother was dangerous, unstable. Your mother believed that leaving was the only way to keep you safe from the chaos Linda was creating." The room went dead silent. "She's been sending money," Maria continued, "to a trust fund in your name that your father never told you about. She's been trying to maintain contact through lawyers, but Linda intercepted every attempt." I felt like the world was spinning. My mother hadn't abandoned me. She'd been driven away and then systematically prevented from reaching me. Dad looked like he was going to be sick. "Linda, what did you do?" Linda's facade finally cracked completely. "I did what I had to do to protect our family. She was going to ruin everything." "She was my wife," Dad screamed. "And Maya's mother, you destroyed our family." That session ended with Linda storming out, but the damage was done. Dad was finally seeing the full scope of what he'd allowed to happen. 6 months later, the transformation was remarkable, not in my family, but in me. The therapy sessions were brutal but necessary. Linda struggled with taking responsibility, often trying to minimize or justify her actions. Dad was better, genuinely seeming to understand how his passivity had enabled Linda's cruelty. But the biggest transformation was in my relationship with my mother. Maria had helped me reconnect with her, and the reunion was everything I'd dreamed of as a child. My mother, Catherine, had spent 15 years believing I hated her, while I'd spent those same years believing she'd abandoned me. "I thought about you every single day," she told me through tears during our first phone call. "I have a room in my house that I've kept exactly as I imagined your room would be. I've been saving money for your college, your wedding, your future, hoping someday I'd get the chance to be your mother again." The trust fund Maria had discovered was worth over $200,000. My mother had been working 2 jobs for 15 years, putting away money for the daughter she thought she'd never see again. When we finally met in person, the resemblance was uncanny. Linda had been right about one thing: I did look like my mother. But where Linda saw that as a threat, I now saw it as a gift. "You're so strong," my mother said, holding my hands. "Stronger than I ever was. I ran away when things got tough, but you stayed and fought and built something incredible." "You didn't run away," I corrected her. "You were driven away by someone who wanted to destroy our family. There's a difference." The best part was introducing her to my chosen family. Elena and Maria welcomed her immediately, and David was charmed by her stories of my childhood. For the first time in my life, I had both a biological family that loved me and a chosen family that supported me. Marcus surprised everyone by thriving in his entry-level position at Elena's company. Turns out, when he wasn't being enabled and coddled, he was actually capable of growth. He was the first to offer a genuine apology, acknowledging how he'd participated in my exclusion. But the real victory wasn't their changed behavior, it was my own peace. I no longer needed their validation. I'd built a life filled with people who celebrated my successes, supported my dreams, and loved me unconditionally. My wedding to David was everything I'd dreamed of. Elena walked me down the aisle since she was the one who'd truly raised me into the woman I'd become, but my mother sat in the front row, tears streaming down her face as she watched her daughter finally get the love story she deserved. The guest list was carefully curated, people who had earned their place in my life through consistent love and support. Dad and Linda attended, sitting quietly in the back. Linda looked uncomfortable and out of place, but Dad seemed genuinely moved by the ceremony. Marcus, who had completed his requirements and genuinely changed, was in the wedding party. But the front rows were filled with my chosen family: Elena and Maria, colleagues who'd become friends, mentors who'd believed in me, friends who'd supported me through the darkest times, and my mother, who had finally got to see her daughter's wedding. During my reception speech, I thanked everyone who had helped me become who I was. I acknowledged the difficult journey that had led me there, and I spoke about the power of chosen family. "Some people are born into families that nurture them," I said, looking out at the crowd. "Others have to build their families from people who choose to love them, and some people are lucky enough to find their way back to the family that was stolen from them. All are valid, all are precious, and all create the foundation for a life well-lived." I caught Dad's eye across the room. He nodded slightly, and I could see tears on his face. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was acknowledgement. But the moment that made the whole evening perfect was when my mother stood up to give a toast. "15 years ago," she said, her voice strong despite her tears, "I thought I had lost my daughter forever. I blamed myself every day for not fighting harder, for not being stronger, for letting someone else's jealousy and manipulation tear apart our family." The room was completely silent. "But looking at Maya now," she continued, "I realized that maybe everything happened exactly as it was supposed to. Because the woman standing here today, successful, confident, surrounded by people who love her, she's stronger than anyone I could have raised. She built herself from nothing, and that strength is something no one can ever take away from her." She raised her glass. "To Maya, who taught me that sometimes the best revenge is simply becoming everything they said you couldn't be." The applause was thunderous, but I was focused on the back of the room, where Linda sat with her mouth hanging open, finally understanding that she hadn't just lost, she'd created her own worst nightmare. The difficult girl she'd thrown away had become a woman more powerful than Linda could ever imagine. The most important lesson I learned through this whole experience is that you cannot force people to value you, but you can refuse to accept treatment that diminishes your worth. The moment I stopped seeking approval from people who were determined not to give it, I found approval in people who were eager to offer it. My relationship with Dad and Linda will never be what it could have been if they'd loved me properly from the beginning, but it's honest now, built on clear boundaries and mutual respect rather than manipulation and desperation. Dad has actually become a decent father in his 60s, once he finally understood the damage his passivity had caused. Linda and I will never be close, but she's learned to treat me with the respect that comes from knowing I hold all the cards now. The beautiful irony is that in trying to get rid of me, Linda actually created the exact outcome she was most afraid of. She was scared of my mother's influence, so she drove her away and then tried to destroy me too. But in doing so, she made me stronger, more determined, and ultimately more successful than I ever would have been if I'd grown up comfortable and coddled like Marcus. And my mother? She's now one of my closest confidants and biggest supporters. We talk every day, and she's involved in every major decision in my life. Linda tried to erase her from our family, but instead created a bond between us that's unbreakable. The company I now run has offices in 12 countries, and my mother works as my executive assistant, finally getting to be part of my daily life. Dad sometimes calls to ask business advice, which still makes me laugh. The man who told me I was a disappointment now asks his disappointment how to handle his finances. But perhaps the most satisfying victory is Marcus. He's thrived in his new environment, finally free from being Linda's golden child, and we've developed a genuine sibling relationship. He was the first person to call Linda out on her behavior, and he's become one of my strongest advocates. "You know what's funny?" he told me recently. "Growing up, I always felt like something was wrong with our family, but I couldn't figure out what. Now I realize it was the way they treated you. Even as a kid, I knew it wasn't right, but I was too scared to say anything." Respect rather than manipulation and desperation. To anyone watching who's struggling with toxic family dynamics, your worth is not determined by how well your family treats you. Some families are broken, and it's not your job to fix them at the expense of your own well-being. Set boundaries, demand respect. Build your chosen family from people who see your value and celebrate it. And remember, sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the consequence of their actions, because that's how people learn to do better. Thank you for watching my story. If you've dealt with similar family situations, share your experiences in the comments below. Like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe for more stories about overcoming adversity, and share it with anyone who might need to hear that they deserve better. Your family's inability to love you properly says nothing about your worth and everything about their limitations. Go build the life you deserve with people who deserve you.